the more you do it, and the more knowledge you have, and the older you get, the better you are, to me. You know what I mean? I'm just as much as a graffiti writer in Los Angeles as I am here, but I'm born and raised here. You drive around now in any city where it is, and there's freaking graffiti everywhere, and for the most part, it's all a bunch of bullshit. It sucks. And the first member of Top Mob, because I made it up. My name is Bugs One from New Orleans, Louisiana. Top Mob crew, Flavor Savers, and the almighty KSN crew.
How did you start making graffiti art, and what inspired you?
Started doing graffiti in 1983 in junior high school, from when I first getting into breakdancing. So from watching different shows and documentaries like Style Wars, Wild Style, and then came along afterwards, Beat Street, breaking, stuff like that. And then I fell in love with hip hop, and I actually ran with it. Graffiti first, then I became a DJ, and then I became an MC, but always stayed as a graffiti writer.
You mentioned hip hop as an influence.
Yep.
To you, what is the relationship between music and graffiti?
The relationship with music and graffiti, to me, was when I started with hip hop, because it was one of the three elements of hip hop. You know, graffiti, breakdancing, DJing, MCing, all the elements of graffiti, which I try to, all the elements of hip hop, I'm sorry, which I try to stay true to. You know, a lot of this new stuff I'm not really down with. I think my train left a long time ago in the 80s, but I'll never stop. You know?
Like, what do you mean by new stuff?
Well, I think from what I'm trying to say is the early 80s into the 90s were like my time period of when I was really doing a lot of stuff, you know what I mean? And when I was a graffiti writer / MC / DJ and all that, it was like the golden era of hip hop for me. I mean, it's the golden era for everyone that does it for each period of time that they're in. But for me, you know, in the early 80s is when it started, you know, and I started 83, 84, and I just kept going. And I haven't stopped writing graffiti since, you know. Back in the day, yeah, it was a big influence, hip hop for me when I would be painting. It got me hyped, gave me more, you know, flow and style to go along with the music, and, you know, like all them elements to me of hip hop, you know, all kind of clash together because it's all style to me. You know what I mean? If you're a graffiti guy, you gotta have that style. You know, if you're a breakdancer, you gotta have that style. If you're a DJ, you got your style. You're MC, you got your different styles. You know,
True.
And everybody's got their own style, but the styles that I grew up with are way, way, way different than what's going on these days. Which I'm not saying I don't like hip hop today or anything like that, but for the most part, it doesn't interest me like it used to back in the days. I'd rather, if I put on the radio, I'll listen to Rakim or Cool G rap right now, still opposed to whoever else they got out there right now. You know,
I feel that. And you know what's also interesting is currently hip hop and graffiti has separated as well. You know,
yeah,
like there's not a lot of like graffiti culture that is, you know, homogenized within the hip hop culture currently, which is interesting. But let's keep tapping on this. So why the name Bugs One?
The name Bugs came from my PE coach in 7th grade, named me Bugs after Bugs Bunny because I had big front teeth. And then the one is always carried after anybody's graffiti, you know, name. The one is always usually like your number one, basically. You know what I mean?
Ah, like one.
That's where that comes from, yeah.
Okay, I
Bugs
didn't know that.
One, like, yeah,
You know.
kind of like, you know, like, of course, you know, all the old school stuff too. KRS-One, graffiti writer, you know?
And,
he's one of my favorites as well too, because he was a graffiti writer, still messes around with it, and he's still probably one of my favorite rappers also. But not only did I listen to hip hop when I was doing graffiti over the years, you know, I love a whole gang of stuff, you know what I mean? I'm into heavy metal, I'm into punk rock, I'm into classic rock and roll. I'm into all of that stuff. You know what I mean? So it's not just hip hop hip hop got me into it, I should say, but
But it's
I
not your
continued.
only.
I went through all different phases in my life with different types of music and all that stuff, you know.
I love
And a lot of the dudes that started a lot of the graffiti on trains and stuff like that in the late '70s and early '80s and stuff like that. A lot of them guys came before hip hop came, you know. If you can remember, in 1979, the Rapper's Delight came out, Sugar Hill Gang. That was like one of the first records to come out. There was some before, but that was the one that made rap get really, really, really popular. Hip hop, I should say. And there was a lot of graffiti writers before that did not listen to any of that. They listened to heavy metal or classic rock or disco or stuff like that, you know? A lot of guys, because disco, there were DJs doing disco stuff. Then they started, when hip hop stuff started coming out, a lot of them disco DJs transitioned into hip hop parties and all of that stuff, you know, like Kool Herc and stuff from Jamaica and New York. And so I got wrapped into all of that type of stuff at once when I was a young kid, and then progressed into different types of music. And I wound up leaving here to pursue more hip hop stuff because I was a musician at the time. When I got out of high school, and I immediately left here to chase being a hip hop artist and a graffiti artist in California. So I went to Los Angeles, California, and one of the crews that I mentioned in the beginning when I introduced myself, KSN, that's a Los Angeles-based crew, one of the first graffiti crews in Los Angeles, and I'm the last member to be let in, and the first member of Top Mob because I made it up.
That perfectly leads me into the next question, which is, what can you tell us about Top Mob? Like, obviously there might be things you can't say or don't want to say, but
yeah, I was in a graffiti crew before Top Mob in '83, '84ish, and we were called CCDS, Crescent City Deaf Styles, as in DEF, like you're deaf. You know, old hip hop term. And but we kicked around the name Top Mob. Me and my friend SGP, which is another founding member. Me and SGP are the founding members of Top Mob. And then we kind of just went that way, and we stopped writing CCDS, and we moved into Top Mob, which we had already had, but we just hadn't used the name yet. But then end of '83, beginning of '84 is that's when Top Mob was pretty much, we put it on the map. And we started tearing shit up.
What does it mean, Top Mob? Is it just literally like the words? Like,
it's just the words.
It's not an acronym or anything like that?
Well, I mean, it can be, you know. We wanted to be the top dogs, you know what I mean?
Right.
And Mob sounded cool, you know, so we put it together and we just roll with it, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. So, like, there's also correlations from early hip hop and rap and graffiti style, when it comes to like an ego of sorts, right? Trying to be the top, trying to be the best.
Well, yeah, it's part of that too, for sure.
Do you think that there was a natural competition that made artists become as good as you are? Like, look, like, this is phenomenal. If someone in the '80s were to see graffiti like this wall right now, what do you think they would say? Like,
they would be like, yeah, that's it. That's it. That's what I'm talking about. Because, you know, a lot of times nowadays it's like, you know, people like me from my era, especially really, really, really good graffiti artists that quit over the years and shit like that. Like back in the day when you would drive around, like I'm just gonna say Los Angeles in the early '80s or whatever, because here there wasn't much here. I pretty much, me and my friend SGP pretty much started everything around here, the whole graffiti movement. But if you were to drive around in Los Angeles in the mid '80s, let's just say, you would see nothing but badass shit everywhere. No bullshit. You drive around now in any city where it is, and there's freaking graffiti everywhere. And for the most part, it's all a bunch of bullshit. It sucks. You know what I mean? Some of them stick out. I don't even look anymore because I'm like, they ain't really
Yeah.
no talent. You know what I mean?
A lot of toys.
Or they moved into some different styles and stuff that they're trying to do when it's not even really cool to keep trying new styles when you can't perfect the style that was in the beginning. You know what I mean? You will never be able to perfect the early 80s, mid 90s styles that they had out. You know what I mean? Kids that do graffiti these days can't even duplicate that. They wasn't part of that. So some of them try, but it just doesn't work. You kind of had to be in that era, you know, to have that in you. Maybe I'm wrong, but from what I see, you know, not taking away from what kids are doing now, because they got these motherfuckers are bad as a motherfucker. You know, they got all the new types of paint, new caps and all that stuff. We didn't have none of that. We had 2 different types of paints to paint with. Krylon and freaking Rust-Oleum. And that's about it. And wet look. There was a couple of them, don't get me wrong. And the only other caps they had was if you went into like K&B or something and stole a little white cap off of a tester's can, like a little model car paint, you know? And that was when you would get good lines and shit, you know? But nowadays, you know, these kids walk up to a wall and they got fucking 100 different caps to pick from, which one does this and which one does that. Me personally, I don't do that. I use whatever comes on the paint, that's it. That's it. And if it comes out a little crooked, it comes out a little, you know, I don't do no stencils. I don't do no freaking cutbacks or whatever they call them. I just go out there and do it. It is what it is. Usually it comes out good enough.
What's your favorite can of paint? And also, what's your favorite like color palette?
My favorite cans of paint now is probably Montana Gold, just with the regular gold stock tip on it. That's what the first fancy paint that I tried to paint with over the years when I kind of started using that paint, and I could deal with that one. They're all pretty much the same, I guess now, all these new paints and stuff like that, but that's the one I usually stick with. Color palette wise, I'm not that type of dude that sits there and picks colors and all of that stuff. I start off with something, you know, and I'll go out there with a bunch of different cans and I'll just kind of just freestyle it, you know? You will see a lot of aqua in my stuff though too, because that's probably one of my favorite colors, is like an aqua-ish color, you know?
You're right. That's true. I'm seeing a lot of it now that you pointed out.
Yeah.
And
right?
It seems like you work very well with colors. Were you ever trained with art? Did you ever study art, or was this all just natural?
I was not trained with art. I did go to art class a little bit. I went to Delgado, and I didn't really participate too much and dropped out of it. And that's about it. Everything else I taught myself just from looking at different pictures and seeing things. But I'm not a biter. I've never stolen not one letter from anybody. I don't do, everything's original, you know? I mean, you know, you get influenced by looking at things, you know? And I have a lot of influences. My main influence is subway graffiti from New York City. And then secondly, old school Los Angeles graffiti, you know? That's, if you look at my style, you can kind of see that it's a little mix between some of that, a little jambalaya, you know? I knew a gentleman here that's a very famous graffiti writer right now. He goes by the name of Risky. He's out of Los Angeles, but he was born and raised here. I used to get photographs when we were younger, every so often, not many, and we'd get to look at them, and it would blow our mind, you know? And then I eventually moved to California, and that's when I started a whole different chapter of my graffiti, you know? I'm just as much as a graffiti writer in Los Angeles as I am here, but I'm born and raised here.
What was it like being like an early graffiti
artist? Well, I'll tell you what it was like. There was no one else in the city except me and SGP, and there was a couple other handful of guys that didn't really do what we were on a mission to do, you know? Well, it was different because there was nobody else, you know? So there was not like nowadays, you know, all these kids get together, graffiti dudes, they got all these crews out here in New Orleans and all that stuff. Back then, it was just us. And my buddy SGP couple years older than me, had a driver's license, so we'd go on missions. You know, I was too young to drive, and so yeah. But then a couple people started popping. You know, a little bit later in the '80s, but then that's when I kind of got out of here and went to California for a while before I came back. You know,
So you
but no, it was great because you know nobody knew what we were doing at all. No one had a clue. Nobody knew really about graffiti or nothing except the, you know, a few people that were still around that I knew from like breakdancing and shit. That we used to go to all the clubs around here and break as kids. You know, they had a bunch of teen clubs scattered around the city, a lot of them in Metairie and stuff. And we used to go to all of them, and that's where you'd meet all the break dancers, and you'd meet some guys that were interested in graffiti and stuff like that. But yeah, and that was good times. That was a great time in my life, you know, definitely. That's where I got to meet like a lot of people like you wouldn't even imagine. Baby from Cash Money Records, another guy, Pat, that he used to hang around with, another guy named Houston he used to hang around with, another guy named Travis, another dude named Boogaloo Troy from the Projects, Magnolia. They were all breakdancers. And they would come with us every so often to the clubs because my other buddy that we breakdance with, this dude Kevin, was older and he could drive. So we'd come to the city, pick them up uptown, bring them to some of the teen clubs and stuff. And believe it or not, some of the guys were good breakers. Baby was a good breakdancer.
Baby was a good
He probably
breakdancer.
does not remember me because I was so young, and he's probably my age or maybe a year or two older than me, something like that. But yeah.
So Baby was in the club breakdancing back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Birdman Baby.
Absolutely. Yep.
And he was good.
Sure was.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to pause it right here real quick. And all I'm going to do is
maybe that was a little unnecessary about Baby. But
we don't need to put it in there.
Yeah.
What currently inspires you to make art? Like you were telling me for this exhibit, a lot of these pieces were made within the last year. So what currently inspires you?
Honestly, what inspires me about doing graffiti is the same thing that inspired me since I started. I mean, it's kind of like if you ask any graffiti writer, it's like I got a disease. You know what I mean? For real, it's like you know, I'll never stop. I will never stop till I die. You know what I mean? It's always, I'm not finished. You know what I mean? I can never perfect what I'm really trying to do. You know what I mean? I still got a long way to go, even though I've been writing since the early '80s. You know, I still think I just haven't got to the point yet to where I want to be. So it's a continuous struggle for me to better myself. You know. And you know, it seems as if, whether it be music, graffiti, or whatever, I mean, you get labeled as being older, you know, well, here's this old guy that does graffiti or this old guy that raps or something. But to me, the more you do it, and the more knowledge you have, and the older you get, the better you are to me. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like I'll put some little young kid out here that's rapping that's, you know, 17 years old. If I put him up against freaking Rakim, I mean, who do you think's gonna win?
Right.
I mean, I think Rakim will, but maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, depends on your definition of win, I would say.
Well, you know, lyrically, who would be the better?
Of course. There's
MC.
The show at the KNOWLA House was your first ever exhibit / art sale / desk installation? Like,
my first solo.
First solo.
Yeah,
okay,
first solo. I've done not plenty of shows, but I've done a handful of shows with other artists, you know.
Right.
But
so
this was my first go around by doing it by myself and all that stuff. And yeah, I put a lot of work into it. I worked really, really hard over the last 2 years, and for the most part, all the paintings in the show were done within the last 2 to 3 years.
Amazing.
I was knocking them out, you know.
I definitely feel like I'm watching a master at his craft. So I love that you say that you feel like you haven't touched your potential fully yet, because that to me means like, holy moly, you got some more great art to come. Where do you see yourself as an artist moving forward?
Moving forward, I'm gonna just continue doing what I'm doing and push myself a little bit harder in the future. And actually try to maybe do some new stuff, maybe that I've never tried before, which I'm kind of sounded like a hypocrite after what I told you earlier, but maybe that's in my future. We'll see. Well, you know, to be honest, Richard, when I started this, and you know how I never was the guy that wanted to put my stuff hanging somewhere for a lot of people to see. It was more for just my group of people, you know, the graffiti community. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Not just for everyone, but now that it's kind of changing and stuff like that, and it's kind of more acceptable than it used to be, because people are doing a lot of street art or whatever, which I'm not a big fan of, but I think the talent's unbelievable. But I'm strictly a graffiti writer. That's it. Style master. Mostly just letters, you know? So you can call me a lettersmith, a letter master, whatever, but I focus on nothing but letters. Traditional graffiti lettering.
What keeps bringing you back? What's that feeling you get when you're like, I'm making a piece, you know? Or like, let's say some of your favorite pieces that you've ever done. What was that feeling that you had in the moment of like that rush?
That feeling, it's hard to explain, but those feelings bring me back to my childhood. And I get the same feeling that I got when I first saw the documentary Star Wars and seeing, you know, Eighth Wonder, the song Eighth Wonder playing while a badass piece on the train is coming by on, you know, on the movie. And, you know, you get the chills and stuff, because that's what I was all into. I still get that same feeling when I do these canvases or if the wall or whatever, you know, that's going off in my head, you know, all that old school stuff, you know, and it gives me the feeling of youth, I guess you could say, you know. In the beginning of when this started, you know, this graffiti stuff and this hip hop stuff is so important to me, is because I was there when it started and I was part of it when it started, you know. That's what makes it for me too, you know.
That's special.
Because I was there, you know. A lot of kids that do it these days, you know, they wasn't there to see all that, you know what I mean? Some of them are knowledgeable about it, but if you wasn't there, you know, when it happened, you will never get that feeling of how it feels when you accomplish, you know, whether it be, you know, going out and hitting a train, or going out and hitting a wall illegally, or going out catching tags and throw ups all over the city, and, you know, just knowing and seeing the fact that you did it, you know, and all your compadres, you know, that are in the same, you know, we all want to see it. But New Orleans was, there was nothing without me and SGP, I should say, in the beginning. There was a handful of others that came right behind us, but we were the ones that put it on the map in New Orleans.
So chasing that feeling,
yeah,
it made you leave New Orleans and go to LA. Did you travel anywhere else and paint? Do you have paintings all over the country / all over the world?
I've painted in a couple different states, but for the most part, just New Orleans, maybe a couple things here and there in Mississippi. Constantly going back and forth to Los Angeles when I can. Every time I go, I paint. I'm in Hawaii sometimes twice a year, and I usually paint every time I'm in, at least once a year in Hawaii, I paint.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you have a piece as far as Hawaii right now?
Oh yeah, I still got some running in Hawaii.
That's
sure.
Amazing.
Yeah. But I got good people out there that took me under their wing that I knew from Los Angeles that have, you know, moved to Hawaii. So yeah, it's one of my spots. I love it.
Some graffiti artists are like daredevils in ways,
yeah.
where it's like they're gonna hit the craziest spot.
Right
were
on.
you like that, or were
No, I wasn't. Well, I mean, I did some crazy stuff. I wasn't the climbing up on buildings type dude or nothing like that. But I did some sketchy stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But pretty much,
So
I never climbed up and on top of the freeway and all that. That wasn't me. You know. But I did some sketchy spots. You know, and
what was it like doing your first solo installation?
I thought it was wonderful. I had a great time. I thank all y'all. It was fucking phenomenal. Had a lot of great people, a lot of old friends that I haven't seen in 20, 30 years show up. And it was just good to see. And good to see that they couldn't believe that I was still doing this shit, you know? And
Successfully too. You sold
yeah,
some
man.
pieces. There's
Yeah, I
many
did.
pieces off the wall missing.
Yeah, I'm surprised that I did sell that many, and thanks to everyone that bought them. And but because I tell my wife all the time, and she tells me, she's like, I know what's gonna happen. I never want to sell nothing. You know what I mean? All of this stuff usually stays in my house. I got my own little area and all that stuff where I like to hang out. And I go back there and play with all my little artwork and all my animals and stuff that I fool with. And it's just like my way of getting away from everything and go back into my world that I love,
Mm, a
And
great
that's when I
escape.
create. And that's how I do it. Throw on my little music, and whether it be, you know, some badass hip hop, or it could be, it could be Black Sabbath. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I just go back there and I create. But
Do you find that your painting may change depending on what mood or energy you're in?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Because I
Some
do
of them
see
can be
different
more
styles.
aggressive than others. If I'm
Yeah.
listening to some aggressive type tunes, or and I'm
Some are more wavy and soft.
yeah, absolutely.
I love
All
that.
depending on a lot of these paintings and stuff that I'll do. Honestly, I don't usually knock them out in one sitting. Like there might be some of them in here like that I started, a year ago, and then I'll come back to it because I try to keep like maybe like 10 at once going. I
In
get sick of doing the
rotation.
same thing over and over, so I'm going a big circle.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting that you're
Especially
able
for
to
some of the
just-
stuff that I like doing some simple things too. But for the most part, when I knew that this was going to happen, I try to step it up on some of them to make them a little bit more marketable or sellable.
Mhm.
That people could tell that I put time into it.
Are you seeing yourself doing more things and potentially getting in more galleries and being known as a graffiti pioneer? Do you think there's something? Do you think there's a movement forward for that?
I think there's a movement for it. For me, possibly. I'm not at this point in my life striving to put the gas down 100% right now. But I think in the future there might be something happening like that.
Mhm.
You know,
For sure.
and the whole thing about it is it really is if I can make money off of something that I totally enjoy and still enjoy this long, it would be definitely worthwhile for me to move forward with it and try to go to the next level with it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
understood. I
Yeah.
think you're capable of it.
Yeah.
Personally, I think you're very capable of it. To people who don't know about
Uh-huh.
bugs or don't know about your art, what would you want them to know? Like, what is bugs? What is bugs? Who is bugs? And what is your art?
Well, I'm just some older 50 some odd year old guy that has a passion for graffiti and a disease for graffiti that just won't stop and it's incurable. And I'll just continue to do it. And for those that do know me, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And for most graffiti writers out there, they know about the sickness. And that's kind of what we all have when we become graffiti writers, And yeah, hopefully I will get things moving forward. Going through a couple rough little times in my life right here, but that ain't gonna stop me. You'll see me again
Beautiful.
for sure.
Tell us about your music.
When I was creating music back in the day, a buddy of mine that is also affiliated with Top Mob, his name is The Phantom. He was a producer. Um, he had a lot of music equipment and decided that I wanted to try to rap and be an MC since I had already been, fooling around with DJ equipment and all of that stuff. And then, so I did that, went to California on vacation, met some great gentlemen that became a member of my group called the original Toed Up crew. We were called Toed Up. So when I had moved to California, we hooked up and we played tons and tons and tons of shows. I used to work at the House of Blues on Sunset Boulevard in talent and promotions. And whenever a band would cancel or whatnot at the venue, I had the opportunity to slide us in. So we opened up for numerous huge hip hop bands, including I I don't know, let's say Sugar Hill Gang, Run DMC, Too Short, Hieroglyphics. Shoot, I can't even think anymore. Like a bunch of them.
Yeah.
You
So
know.
you had a nice little career popping.
Yeah,
at
it
the
didn't really
point.
amount to too much, but that happened. Then we kind of had a little fallout with that group, with a management company that had starting. We actually got nationwide distribution, but it fell through. And then I winded up starting another group with a bunch of my buddies that were all from New Orleans, even though I was living in Los Angeles. And we were getting back and forth together. And we put out a record called Intoxicants. That was the name of our group. And started doing shows and that good old stuff. And that kind of fell apart. And one of the members, who was actually from Top Mob, he wrote Rock. He actually passed away, and pretty much after that, that was it for that group. But that might still be on the table as well. I might be back with that.
Who were some of your favorite writers? Like either growing up, like in the game, like was there anyone that you were like, wow, that was a really awesome person, or loved their style? And...
Wow, yeah, so many. It's Zephyr from New York, Cinto from New York, Rise from KSN. Shoot, too many to mention, honestly. Rival, one of my best friends, Rival from WCA, probably the best, I would say, writer in Los Angeles. My ex-roommate also, probably one of my favorite writers of all time. I used to love Scheme, one of the best writers of all time.
Yeah.
And he's actually a member of Top Mob now.
Ooh, there you go.
Yep, New York City, old school New York City subway writer. And I got to meet him, and we became friends. And he's by far one of my favorites, sure.
Mm-hmm.
The beginning of Top Mob was me, Bugs One, SGP One, which also used to write Bamzy, Bamzy. Then we had a guy named Rackus. We had a guy named Crash. And then after that, we started venturing off back and forth in different directions of the city. And we met up with Axe One, AXE, Baser, Cash with a K. We had Bobby Siege, Siege. That was an original member. We had Dusk, an original member from Bucktown. And then from there, Siege got Harsh in. So we had Harsh. And after that, a bunch of other members got in that I could name, but I'm not quite sure exactly how everyone was put in, honestly. But we have Seek, we have Meek, we have Reed, we have Sank, we have Ink, we have Painter. We have another old school writer named Shock, ACO, Lil C for a little while, Issue, another badass member, Tracer. I'm probably forgetting a bunch of people. But,
Anything you want to say in closing?
Thanks everybody that came out to see my first little event here at KNOWLA Kastle, and please come out to the little closing that we're going to be doing and buy some paintings. Come chit chat with me. If you want to know anything about that you didn't hear on this video or whatnot, I'm all ears and I love to talk.
That sounds good.
Something like that, right?
Yeah, something like that, right?